raised on the East Coast by Haitian immigrant parents who first sparked a love of real estate, dance, and community within her. She moved to Great North, where she graduated with a BA in psychology from the University of Alaska Anchorage. After enduring 5 Alaskan winters working in her field, Natalie headed south to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where she was responsible for overseeing the financial operations of a major art gallery for over 12 years. During that time, she married a champion, and they moved across the ocean with their feathered and furry babies to be closer to family in Hawaii. Here, Natalie is honored to help others build wealth through real estate and give back to her community by volunteering for several organizations, including being president of her homeowners association, chair for the Honolulu Board of Realtors, and president-elect for the Rotary Club, Rotary Club of Hawaii. A quote she loves as a reminder to come from a space of vulnerability, humility, and curiosity is, don't believe everything you think. That's a good one. Natalie, I'm going to let you take over, and I'm excited for you to be here. And Natalie's topic, she has been talking about diversity and inclusion in Rotary clubs. So I'm excited to hear all about it.
Thank you so much, Robina. And I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with all of you. I am here in Hawaii. I know everybody's jealous when I say that, but it is got its own set of problems, including being prohibitively expensive to be here. So a little bit more background from me. I did operate a gallery whose owner had 2 galleries, one in Santa Fe and the other in Cheyenne, Wyoming, which I know is pretty close to where you, well, relatively close to where you are. And so he would drive from Cheyenne to Santa Fe about every month and look over and make sure that I wasn't cooking the books or doing whatever I wanted, which I did whatever I wanted anyway, and then head back to Cheyenne. And that experience that I had with the owner, it led me to realize that I could love dearly somebody who had different views than me. And I think that that is something which we as a country seem to have lost. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about bridging the divide that I see around me. Just as an FYI, I do have parrots, and so whenever I speak, they think I'm talking to them. So you might hear them speak back to me. Their names are Sophie and Lucy, and I might bring them in after I'm done talking. So yes, as far as my exposure to diversity, Santa Fe is a fairly diverse place. A lot of Hispanic locals, a lot of Native Americans, a lot of white people, not a whole lot of Black people, but it is a bit of a mixing pot. There is a strong indigenous population, and there's a strong honor of that indigenous population with our annual Indian market, and it gives people an opportunity to connect with people of divergent backgrounds. And having that makes it easier to explore respectfully differences, because everybody's got a different way of defining our world. Everybody's got the experiences that they were born into, and that is really how we define our world. So, I mean, for starters, I like to ask people, you know, which one, like who here would proudly raise their hands and consider themselves a racist? I don't see any hands raising, oddly enough. I say that you know, a little tongue in cheek, because obviously nobody wants to be labeled as a racist. And really, it's almost impossible to think of oneself as a racist, because we know the world through the perception and the perspective that we've been born into. And that, I think, is a primary reason why there's such a huge divide, because we're just not understanding the reality that different people have different experiences which define their reality. And for me, that is one of the most important things that we can acknowledge before any kind of healing can happen. How can Rotarians stand up for equality and against racism? One of the ways that we can is to take a pause, take a breath, and contemplate, is there such a thing as racism in our society? Because some people do not think that there is racism in our society. Some people don't think that that's a problem in our society. Some people believe that the amount of attention given to righting the wrongs of racism is misguided or not in keeping with the amount of racism which is still in society. And some people don't even have a clear definition of what racism is. So one of the things I'd like to do is talk about that, because there's some difference between racism and prejudice. You can be a victim of somebody showing like prejudice towards you and have it not be the same thing, because it is not a systemic reality. So what I'm here to talk about is the systemic reality of racism and what we can do to acknowledge it and have conversations of curiosity and vulnerability, with the assumption that our perspective might not encompass the totality of all people's perspective. And one way to do that is to get more comfortable with difficult conversations and acknowledge one's lack of understanding about topics which may not directly affect them. So my husband is a forensic psychiatrist, which means that he has studied forensics, which is the study of law, psychiatry, which is the intersection of the mind and the body. And he's worked in the prison systems for this country for about 25, 30 years. He's currently not doing that right now. But in his work, he noticed the disproportionate percentage of both Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous people in the prison system. And he grew up in North Carolina and had a very different viewpoint of the world than he does today. But one of the things that helped shape his worldview was having conversations with people whose background was nothing like his own. And that can be really intense, and it can be really scary. And it takes courage. So one of the women who I deeply admire is Brene Brown. And she speaks on vulnerability and the importance of the courage to be vulnerable in the midst of difficult conversations. our culture currently is inundated with canceling people because they don't believe the same way we do. I hope that you would agree with me that that is an issue, that is a problem, because you tend to result in having an echo chamber based around people who believe the same thing that you do. And to me, that's why our country is being pulled apart, because we are so set in our perspective that there's no conversations with people who believe differently than we do. One of the things that she has pointed out is that when you just come from a perspective that the other person's viewpoint is wrong, there's no opportunity for a conversation, which is why one of my favorite quotes is saying, "Don't believe everything you think." When you suspend that judgment of somebody else's perspective is wrong, you open the door for understanding. And from that point of understanding can emerge a plant of mutuality and friendship, even though somebody else's experiences are different than yours. The Rotary E-Club of Hawaii is very diverse. There are people from all walks of life that converge with our club, and they feel safe in the midst of it because it is a very non-judgmental and open space. And to me, that is essential to healing the divide that we're experiencing as a country. We're also going through a pandemic, which is putting everyone on edge, making everyone anxious, making things more difficult, causing a lot of division in how like essential or important it is to practice social distancing and do those things. But like the main takeaway from that is that we're separating even more with the pandemic. We used to meet in public, even though we were an E-Club and we were set up to be able to stream our meetings before the pandemic, because we had members from all over the country who just wanted to be part of the E-Club of Hawaii. So we were ready to go once the pandemic hit, but I miss the camaraderie of being able to gather in large groups and have the networking and the energy and the joy and the fun of being together. And I look forward to having that once again. But with that separation and with this platform, it makes it easy to feel isolated. And it's easy when you're feeling isolated to focus on things that reinforce your beliefs. It is hard and uncomfortable to force yourself to look and listen to things that are not in keeping with what your worldview is. And it is so ultimately worthwhile and fulfilling. I say that from experience because I used to be very polarized in one direction, and having conversations with people from all walks of life, both as a realtor and as a gallery director and as the wife of a physician and as a Rotarian, has reminded me of what is really important in life, because we all have an expiration date. We are all going to die. And is it really that important to win arguments on the internet with strangers? Or is it more important to be kind to each other? Is it more important to build community and connection with each other? Is it more important to recognize and honor the diversity that makes this world interesting, and it makes our conversations interesting if we're not reactive to new thoughts that are not in line with how we were raised? Just the suspension of certainty that our viewpoint is correct can lead to just opening your mind and having the thought, I might be wrong about what I'm talking about. That level of humility has been so fulfilling to me. And so I have felt moved to talk more about it. And I don't love public speaking. I am very much an introvert. The pandemic was kind of right in line with, I was like, great, that means that I can just stay at home and read as much as I want. So it wasn't that bad a thing for me. But there is something that rings so true about recognizing that we are in this social experiment that is the United States together. And I feel like people have forgotten that. And it kind of breaks my heart, because I see families being torn apart. I see people just canceling each other for having different beliefs. And those beliefs are based on the input that we think and feel, and that we look at on our news sources and on social media. So of course people are going to think and feel a particular way, but it doesn't mean that they're not people. So having grace in disagreement is something that I wish was more taught. Some of the guidelines that Brene Brown has given in her request that we engage in vulnerability and be open to feedback, which takes courage to put yourself out there. This is what I believe. It takes courage because somebody might believe something differently. But if both parties are willing to hold each other accountable without shaming or blaming them for their experiences, which has caused them to think in a particular way or feel in a particular way, so much growth can happen. So much connection can happen. So much healing can happen as a result of that. Being able to model the vulnerability and the openness and the humility that you might be wrong allows people to do the same. I would say it really might open the door to having an expectation that people will think and do the same. And from that, beauty and joy and healing are an inevitable effect. Thanking people for their efforts rather than criticizing people for their failings is another way to just feel connected with each other. I love Daryl Davis. I don't know if anybody knows who that is, but Daryl Davis is a musician who had the courage and the stamina to openly talk about race with members of the Ku Klux Klan. He clearly disagreed with them. He was a Black musician who played in the South for decades, clearly disagreed with their positions, but he was willing to engage them in civil discourse. He was willing to hear their opinions, and he was willing to share his perspective in a way that was uniting versus dividing. He also was willing to do his research, which, as I said before, is an uncomfortable process to actively read and listen to opinions that go very much against your perspective. It's a hard thing to do, but it is so respectful to people that believe differently that they are almost forced to then give you that same courtesy and grace to listen to what it is you have to say. So holding the space to do that resulted in him being responsible for hundreds of people leaving the Ku Klux Klan. He found common ground with them. He gave them a platform. Even though he disagreed with them, he gave them the time and space to listen. And as we look at our country currently with Antifa, Black Lives Matter, neo-Nazis, Trump supporters, Biden supporters, there's this us versus them mentality, which is ripping our country apart. And for what? If nobody's going to talk to each other, if nobody's going to have these difficult conversations, then the country that I love and I'm so grateful to be born in is going to lose. The entire country is going to lose. So I urge you to not let hate win. I urge you to open your minds and hearts to people who have different perspectives than you. I urge you as Rotarians to come from service. Consider it a service to your fellow human beings to do that difficult work and be vulnerable and be open to different perspectives so that you can have civil discourse, so that you can agree to disagree with respect and kindness, even though somebody is talking about something that might feel threatening to you or might feel like it is shaking you to your core. It's essential if we as a country are going to move beyond what is dividing us. Now, I have different resources, which I'm happy to put in the chat, to open up conversations about race or fragility or having difficult conversations with people in family or just people that you work with. Being able to recognize that, you know, saying that like Black Lives Matter obviously doesn't mean only Black Lives Matter. all lives should matter, but all lives can't and don't matter unless the lives of Indigenous people, minorities such as Hispanics, Asian, Black, can and do matter. Saying that Trump supporters are X, Biden supporters are Y, it's easy. It's so easy to do, and it's so limiting because everybody has just as rich and diverse of subjective experience as each individual one of us does. But we tend to forget that in the midst of seeing people as other, because it's super easy for our mind to do. So I urge you as fellow Rotarians to do the work to bridge the divide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate that. That was very good. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to open it up and you guys can.
I don't have a question, but I would comment that I think for someone who feels that she's introverted, you're an extremely good public speaker. I was trying to think, well, I agree with you entirely on everything you said, but I couldn't possibly begin to keep it all in my mind and speak about it spontaneously. So this isn't your first rodeo, is it? But in any case, I also thought, how could you possibly have all those life experiences when you look so young? I'm reminded of two things. One is the cowboy comic of a long time ago said, "I never met a man I didn't like." And I think that can only happen if you try to look for something likable in the person that you're greeting. Look for what they have in common with you. Look for those common grounds. You know, and the science would say we're all at least 97, 98% the same DNA as the next person. So we have so much in common. To be looking for those differences is sad. Now, I think racism is universal because, as you said, everyone thinks of not I. You know, someone isn't I, they don't think the way I do, they don't look the way I do, they don't speak the way I do, they're not I, and that can be a point of prejudice and division. But you need to recognize that everyone has very much the same human experience, very much the same likes and dislikes in the way the world treats them. They have the same goals for themselves, for their families, for their countries, for their world. We just have to find out how each individual can contribute and how they see it and what maybe they have to offer that we haven't thought of. The other point, besides Will Rogers, the cowboy comic, was I have a quote on my wall from Mother Teresa, who basically says, you know, you look for the face of Jesus in every person you meet. You don't have to be a Christian to know what she means. You look for the good in that person. You look for the holy in the person. You look for the positive things in that person and how they are trying as best they can to live the life they think their God asked them to. So I guess I'm going to just say kudos to you, Natalie, a wonderful talk. I agree entirely, and I think we all need to recognize the fact that it's inherent in our society. We need to work around it. And there was a time when getting opposite opinions was the name of the game, and why you sought higher education was not to be just cornered in a box with just your kind of people.
You muted yourself, Mike. Mike, you're muted. Somehow you muted yourself.
Yeah, I have a priest friend who tries to keep everyone in the congregation from reading any literature outside of that which he approves, and it reminds me so much of the fascist states. And I think we as Americans are getting that way. You know, if you're a Democrat, you'll never watch Fox News. If you're a Republican, you'll never watch CNN. And that's a sad commentary. We need to be open to other people's opinions, even if we think they're biased or different than our thinking. And I think Natalie pointed that out very well. So I'll shut up now and let other people comment.
Anybody else? Dawn, Dawn, you're muted if you're trying to speak. No, you're still muted. You might have a conversation with somebody else, of course. Dawn, are you talking to us, Dawn? Blink twice if you're talking to us. Okay. Want to make sure you were safe. You there you go. Perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Thank you.
Right. Anyway, I just wanted to respond to Natalie also and appreciate your remarks. I just wanted to build on a passing remark that you made in terms of systemic racism. My perception, along with what you were talking about, is we really need to recognize that we individually still are racist at many levels. And my thinking is that the biggest challenge facing us is the depth of our systemic racism. And I always think about that as, okay, I can deal with my own or another individual, but to deal with the system that we're in, which is built around racism, is a huge challenge. And I'd be interested if you have ideas about places to attack the issue at that level.
Thank you for the question, Donald. I appreciate it. So yeah, I do. You know, as a realtor, I'm familiar with redlining, which, if others don't know, it was the practice of not allowing loans to be put on properties that were in historically Black or Hispanic neighborhoods. And that, combined with racist homeowner policies, which would prevent Black or Hispanic homeowners from purchasing in other neighborhoods, led to a lack of generational wealth in Black and Hispanic families, which the effects are still being felt today. So that the National Association of Realtors has obviously condemned, but that form of institutionalized racism is important to acknowledge that the effects are still being felt currently. So, you know, there has been a lot of talk about, you know, defund the police. And while my husband's a forensic psychiatrist, we have a lot of friends who are police. I think that it's important that we recognize that it's very easy. Okay, let me take that back. It's not so easy to subdue somebody who's psychotic and violent, but there are nurses and orderlies who do that all the time without killing patients. So it can be done. We've put all of the things that we want police to do on them, and it's not fair. It's not fair. It's unrealistic to expect that a police could have such a wide array of skills to deal with a wide array of conditions and circumstances, especially with the very bare minimums that we have to bring police into the force. So changing the parameters of what is needed to be a police officer and changing the parameters of what the expectations are. Like, why not fund more social workers? Why not fund more nurses? Why not fund more EMTs that are able to de-escalate situations, and just narrow the focus of, you know, if you're having any kind of trouble, call the police. Like narrow that to if you're having a very specific kind of trouble, call the police. So that would be, in my opinion, one way to help make that institutional racism something less of a huge burden on our society. Thank you.
I received, sorry, I've been in and out a little bit, and I got a little bit of your presentation. Thank you for the comments and the thoughts. I got an email today, just kind of popped up, bounced off of a June post that I made in regards to this topic of race and everything that was kind of happening back in June. And the person is a Black female, and she just shared something. I just want to read this to you guys real quick. She said, "You're spot on. All lives do matter. Ours just matter less, and mattered less, and they should matter the same." Someone gave me a great analogy. When you go to a house fire, you put water on the house that's on fire. It's not that the other houses don't matter. They all matter, but you are there to help the house that's on fire. You may spray adjacent houses, but not all the houses. The house that's on fire is who needs you the most at that time. And I just thought that was an interesting, based upon my profession, and the analogy was just kind of an interesting one. I know it's a hot topic, no pun intended, but I thought that was a perspective that was interesting and shared in a different perspective.
Very good. I guess we do have actually a lot of hot topics. So we need you now more than ever, Chris. All kinds of hot topics that needs to cool down. And I think everybody, all of us are definitely going inwards a lot more and doing a lot more inner work than anything. And that's probably what we need just from what's going on, having to stay home, having to not bigger gatherings and not always looking outwards for answers. And for me, even for the authorities to take control of our world and make it better, and the presidents and the government and you know, the police and so forth. Really, it is we, the people, that are going to make the change. Nobody can make us behave a certain way. They are there to keep the order maybe, but ultimately it is us individuals, our morals, our thoughts, and everything that we are that's going to survive humanity. Anyway, over this past weekend, when I was gone in New Mexico, I was at this beautiful place, super hot, you know, the sun is shining, and this property was very much laid up as a sanctuary for you to just go and relax and heal and pray and meditate and whatever you do. And one of her little spot had this huge quartz, the mineral, the rock, it's white, and it was huge, it was beautiful, and I touched it. It was ice cold, and I was shocked at how beautiful it was first, and then how cold it was in this heated, you know, like 80, 90 degree weather. And it just made me realize how cool something can be and beautiful in this heat. Kind of made me think about myself too, being super involved in everything and wanting to do everything, and whether it's my kids doing the wrong thing or my work not going the right way, or just in life in general. But as soon as I calm myself down, I'm okay with whatever is going on, and I don't take it too personally. How cool that is. So back to really, yes, we have all these tools, all these authorities that are supposed to bring order to our world, but it's going to come down to us staying calmer. And, you know, even with the protests and all this stuff, the calmer protests do make a difference. The riots and the burnings and the violence and the guns showing up at these big gatherings are not making it any better. But the people that do come together and do want to have a conversation and do want to make a change for the better do make a difference, because they are calmer. I don't know, that's going to stick with me for a while. the thought process that I went through. So I appreciate you bringing all of this extra knowledge, Natalie. I think we're all being better and doing better and just getting this conversation inch by inch to where it needs to be, rather than avoiding the conversation because they're not comfortable, whether it's with family or close friends, you know, friends for a long time. I think we do need to keep it up and still keep our humor up, even if we're not funny. But we're gonna get through it all, and we're gonna be better people on the other end of it. So I appreciate you wanting to speak up about this and sharing with your Rotary family.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you giving me a platform for it. And I appreciate you saying that I look young. I'm actually 44. I just look like a baby.
That's
I like your fire sprinkler too you have in the back, I noticed in your room, so you're safe. So
safety first.
Strong work.
Nothing gets by that guy, by the way. If it's about the fires, trust me.
Always watching.
You're always watching. That's good to know. And he lives in our town, which is even better. Anybody else? I know there's a few other ones. It was kind of a last minute invite. Hopefully we'll get better, and hopefully we'll meet in person one day and can have these conversations and walk away, all of us feeling like we mattered and we got something out of it. Thank you very much. Please come back anytime. I would love to hear more about Hawaii and Rotary clubs, out the other topics as well. Maybe real estate. Maybe we all want to move. I mean, depends on who gets elected. Like, depends. I hear that all the time, and I have to laugh. Like, I moved here 35 years ago. I'm not going anywhere. I don't care who rules this country. But I do hear that people wanting to move. So we might be calling you.
I think Natalie needs to organize a Rotary social in Honolulu. That would work for me.
Yeah, well, I missed seeing all of you this year, but we'll be back in Honolulu, I think in 4 years. The Rotary annual meeting will be here again, maybe in 2024, I think.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. I think the meeting is adjourned. If there's nothing else that is on anybody's